Hey guys, and welcome to episode 17 of Creators Campfire. Tonight we have joining us Mitch Gray, who is a leadership and development coach, and we are going to be talking all things side hustles tonight, which is perfect for this show and perfect for me because I love talking about this stuff. So I guess the premise behind this is that nowadays everyone seems to have a side hustle. I guess with COVID as well, it's even more relevant. So tonight we're going to understand a bit more about what a side hustle is, whether you need one, whether you should do one, and if you should, then what you're going to do. So guys, please welcome our guest, Mitch. Hey,
how are you?
How are you? I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I have to point out, you keep saying tonight, and if you notice my light here, this is all natural daylight.
This is a very good point.
So yeah, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon for me. So it keeps throwing me off when you say tonight. I'm like, tonight? Am I here at the wrong time? I hope I'm not.
You are absolutely not. And it's a good point, actually. And I always get confused because I just assume people are on the same time zone. And I'm
Right.
like, nope, they're like on the other side of the world.
Yes,
Need
exactly.
to remember it's not nighttime for them. So guys, for those watching around the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Right.
Just in case, let's cover all bases. So Mitch, welcome. Do you want to give people a bit of a background as to who you are and what you do to start with?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on your show.
No
We
worries.
had a great conversation a couple of weeks ago, I guess. And
Yeah.
but I feel like this is going to be a really fun conversation, and hopefully we'll get some interaction and people will ask fun questions. So, but it's going to be good either way. Yeah, I am in the United States. What a crazy time to be alive in the world, period, right?
Yes.
So it's an interesting season of life. I am a leadership and personal development coach. I've done a lot of things in my life over the last 2.5 decades, but the biggest thing I love doing is just inspiring people to greater thought, to greater creativity. I love helping people, what I call, step into their dreams. And so over the last probably 10 years, I've kind of tried to manifest that in a few different ways. I work with a lot of business owners and business leaders, how they can maybe better their business culture, find great people, develop great people. But on the personal kind of side of life, I just love working with people in general and doing what I can to make the world a better place. So yeah.
Awesome. No, that's brilliant to hear, actually, because it's nice when people just help people rather than like looking to get ahead themselves or whatever, which like is fine and everything. But I guess times like these have kind of proven more than anything how you kind of need that in the world, and it's great to see that that's what you're doing. But you, just before I carry on, guys, that is a good point. If you have questions as we go through for Mitch, please drop them in the comments wherever you're viewing this, whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. Drop them in the comments and we'll get to them as we go, and we'll be sure to put them in. And before I forget, so side hustles. Shall we start with what they are for anyone that doesn't know?
Yes, let's go side hustle. Kind of a weird phrase, right? That probably started popping up, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, this whole idea of side hustle. A guy named Chris Giabo wrote a book called Side Hustle, actually. Great read, by the way, but just it's kind of interesting. I was actually thinking this morning as I was kind of mentally preparing for the show, really when I stop and think about it, my dad had a side hustle my whole life. He didn't call it that. He was a school teacher by profession, but he was a farmer as well. And so I grew up on the farm. And so my dad would teach school. And then at 3:30, he would get home and he would change clothes and he would go work on the farm until dark. That was his everyday routine. We didn't call it a side hustle. It was just life. But really, when you look at it, it's like everyone has always had a side hustle, whether it's a hobby or whether it's something they're trying to pursue. It just seems like, things kind of run in trends and in fads, and then we give them a cool name so everybody can relate to it. We can sell cool books, and side hustle became kind of that fad. So I would say, when we talk about side hustles, really what we're talking about are paths of interest. Sometimes that's by forced omission. In other words, you don't make enough money at your day jobs, so you have to go get a part-time job, a side hustle. Sometimes it's because you just love what you're doing. And so you're kind of turning a hobby into a greater level of interest. And so you don't hear the word hobby as much anymore. I think because people think the word hobby devalues. I'm one of those guys. I'm like, I have no hobbies. Which when you really look at it, I probably have like 402. But, and so we
Yep.
started talking about this idea of side hustle. And so as I was thinking this morning, I'm like, really, probably throughout the history of humanity, people have had side hustles, whether it's just to make a little extra money, whether they're trying to turn their dream into reality, or whether it's just a fun thing they enjoy doing, aka a hobby. And so I think there's a different definition of side hustle for everyone and whatever their purpose is.
I think that's actually a really good way of flipping it. And I haven't ever thought about it like that. It's rather than trying to find something that you enjoy to do a side hustle, it's actually, here's something you already enjoy that can be a side hustle, rather than, I don't know, chasing the money, which I understand in some cases is a necessity, but for you're right, it is kind of a cool thing to have a side hustle or something, and that word in itself has its own kind of connotations, and it's like, let's just flip it a bit, maybe. You don't have to have a side hustle. It's a hobby, whatever that becomes. If you start to make money off it, fine. If you don't, fine. Not everybody wants to make money off it, I guess. It's just, I think that's a really good way of looking at it as a hobby.
Yeah, really, the word is motivation. So the question then becomes, what is your motivation for a side hustle? Is your motivation to turn dream idea into reality? Is your motivation to replace full-time income? Is your motivation to just be able to pay the bills? Is your motivation that you're at a job that wears you out, and so your side hustle actually gives you life? Like, that's the real question, is what is my motivation for a side hustle? And I think what's happened is we've had this paradigm shift to where side hustle has to be all about money. And like you just said, that's not necessarily the case. Side hustle, there's all kinds of ways of currency. There's monetary currency, there's emotional currency, there's physical currency, there is intellectual currency. So someone may have a side hustle of taking a part-time class at their local community college every semester because they just enjoy learning new things. That's a type of currency. And so when we open our mind to getting away from monetary currency as the only form of payment, to actually looking at what is my motivation for a side hustle, it changes the game. I'm on this big kick lately, and that's getting away from the word hustle and into the word alignment.
Okay.
And those are two very different things, because when you think hustle, you think constantly in motion, fighting, grinding. Yes. When you think alignment, you think of things that fit into your purpose and into your place of being, and it brings about greater presence rather than greater stress. And so it's kind of this idea of, if my side hustle actually fits the alignment of my life, whatever that could be, and that alignment changes, then it all of a sudden removes the stress of thinking about the hustle and the bustle and constantly going forward. You can be a hard worker and still have alignment and not worry so much about hustle.
Yes, I think it's exactly right. The word hustle potentially has negative associations for a lot of people, and they have an image of what hustling is, whereas, to your point, as soon as you flip it and say, hang on, this is an alignment, this is what I'm doing to make myself happy, or it's coming from the inside, and I will define what success is. It doesn't necessarily have to be money. It's potentially just finding some inner peace. Then all of a sudden, it's not like I have to go and do that. It's I want to go and do that. Yes. And it's flipping the feelings to positive ones. And all of a sudden you have that motivation.
Yeah, so think about this for a second. If I'm in a place in life that's really stressful, so we're in a worldwide pandemic, people are losing their jobs, companies oftentimes aren't really handling this the best way they could. What if during a time of stress, my side hustle became meditation?
Yeah, okay.
So I said, okay, my new side hustle and focus is going to be meditating for 4 hours a week. Think about the dividends and the currency that would pay over a month, 2 months, 3 months. So then all of a sudden I'm filling myself up with alignment so that I can maybe pursue something else down the road. Because there's this idea psychologically that when I'm talking side hustle and more work, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas if I'm talking alignment, I'm now going, okay, yeah, right now I'm short on money. I need to have a side hustle to pay for some things, but it's only going to be 6 months. And then I'm going to flip the side hustle to something else. So I think really what I'm inviting people to do is, instead of looking at a micro level, to actually pull out and look at a 15,000 feet elevation level, to where you can really see things for what they are.
Yeah. And I guess there are of course people that need the money, and therefore their motivation is completely different, but they're probably a smaller percentage of the people that are maybe watching, whereas the others maybe want to improve or develop or
Yes.
kind of set the groundwork for maybe doing something in the future. So something like meditating or learning skills now will pave the way for them to do what they want to do in a year or two. And it doesn't have to be 20 hours a day now. It could be, 8-10 hours in 2 years, because you've laid the foundation.
Let's say you want to write a book. Your dream is to be an author. So you work a full-time job as a school teacher, and you're like, but I really want to be an author. My 5-year plan is to be writing full-time, get away from school teaching full-time. If you write an hour a day, 5 days a week for the next 3 years, you're going to write a book. So really, it's just talking about how to pull things back and go, okay, I have this big vision. Because most of the time when you talk to people that are side hustlers, they're actually big visionaries. And it's like, we're really side hustling, if we're honest, because we're trying to bite off more than we can chew. Like, that's the real reason when you get down to it. But no one wants to have that conversation, right? Because it's not prestigious. Like, telling people the truth that really what you're doing is taking on too much is not what's going to sell books. And so no one wants to have that conversation. But if we make it palatable and we say, okay, I want to be a writer, I want to be an author, I want to have a book, I want to move into that full time, then write an hour a day. Actually, in 6 months to a year, you'll have a book. In 3 years, you may have 3 or 4 books. Instead of trying to take it all on at once, maybe you want to start that bakery. Okay, start taking orders at work for people to buy your cupcakes, and do that 3 times a month. And then now it's something that's tangible. And again, we're talking about alignment. How can you align the side hustle into what's already happening in your life and still not add stress to it?
Yeah. I'm loving the approach that you've got to this, and the way you're flipping, I guess, what you would normally associate with these words or these kind of things. I was actually listening to a podcast this morning. I think it was Justin DeRosa's on process, and it was he was talking about the curse of immediacy. And it's exactly that. It's everything nowadays is so, I want it now. It's instant gratification. It's like, I do want to be an author. It needs to happen in 2 months, right? It's now or never. And there's this whole kind of mindset of it. It has to be immediate. So how do you kind of tell people to take that step back, or be okay with it being a few years down the line and taking that 15, 20,000 feet view, when all they can think of now is, I want it?
So number one, the good news is, I guess it's good news, bad news, but the good news is that's a constant process. It's a constant battle, because we do live in a society that is so, within a 10-minute drive from where I am now, I can buy food, I can buy clothes, within an hour, I can buy a whole new wardrobe and whatever. So it's all very immediate. I mean, I remember when the internet first came out, and if you ordered something online, it took like a month to get there, right? Now it's like I can go to Amazon and order a new microphone and it's here tomorrow. Like, it's just honestly insane what we've done to ourselves. So that idea of allowing the process to work is a constant battle. And kind of the way, just to side note here, I learned that the hard way. I learned this idea. Someone asked me one time, if you could go back and tell your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? I said it would be one word: patience. Patience, patience, patience. So I really believed by the time I was 30 years old, so I'll be really honest with people, I'm 43. So by the time I was 30 years old, at 18, I thought by the time I was 30 years old, I would be a best-selling author, a world-renowned speaker. I'm also a songwriter, so I thought I would have a Grammy or 2 by then. Like, out of these big, grandiose ideas. But what happened is, when you lay on yourself that high expectation and that self-expectation, For some of us, we handle it differently. For me, what happened is by the time I was 30 years old, late 20s, I was battling with depression. I was battling with self-sabotage because I had put these such high expectations on myself that if I didn't get to where I wanted to be, then life was over. And so what that led to in my late 20s, I got fired from my favorite job I've ever had. It was my dream job. I got fired from that job. I didn't know how to respond to that. I had a record deal that I had to let go of because of my depression, because I couldn't deal with it. I had to let go of that. So now all of a sudden, all of these self expectations that we put internally, we all of a sudden bind ourselves to those and we hold ourselves accountable to those. And then for some of us, it becomes very self-destructive. I know other people that happens and they just get more pissed off and they just work harder, So we all deal with it differently. So my thought to people is, when you have this dream or you have this idea, you want to write that book or open that bakery or go back to school, it's okay to take time. It's okay to be patient. It's okay to just do a little bit every single day, because a little bit every single day is going to get you much further down the road than trying to take it all on at once. And again, as big visionaries, we think we can take it all on at once. As hard workers, we think we can take it all on at once instead of just taking. There's a guy that's in the financial world. He's a financial advisor. His name is Dave Ramsey. He says the only way to eat an elephant is one spoon at a time, one bite at a time. So that's a little grotesque, but his whole point is an elephant is this giant beast, right? So if you're going to tackle this giant beast, you have to take it on one small step at a time. And so my saying in life has become the only way to build a building is one brick at a time. And if you get one brick out of position, it's going to cause damage over the years. And so my last book took me 5 years to write. 5 years. That's insane to me. And so you start thinking of those things and it just takes patience. And you hear other people talk about it, the influencers on social media, but they're right. Nothing happens overnight. And if it does happen overnight, you're probably not prepared for it. So you're probably going to lose it really quickly, like winning the lottery. Like how many people who win the lottery 3 years later, they're broke?
Yes.
They don't have a plan. Yeah.
Completely. How do you balance having big dreams with having the patience and understanding how much you can take on? Because you could still do something every day and overdo it. So, I mean, I'm guessing it's some kind of trial and error because nobody knows yourself better than you. But
right.
There's obviously a balancing act of, say, to your point, I want to write a book. How do you set a realistic expectation of it being 1 year or 5 years that doesn't lead to that burnout and overwhelm and potential self-destruction?
So again, I think it's about alignment. I think you have to be honest with yourself about where you are in life. I tend to think like an overachiever. There was a study quite a few years ago that they were studying why people are late, like people that are serially late to meetings all the time. What they found is that the people that are late most of the time, habitually, are actually more positive thinkers than the people that are on time. And what they found psychologically is that the people that are late usually have this thought of, oh, I have 30 minutes. I can get this, and this done. Whereas the people that are on time or early are the worriers. And they're like, no, I have to be there 20 minutes early. I can't do anything else. And the people that are actually on time or early are more stressed than the people that are late all the time. So I'm sure you can guess why I listened to this study, because I'm late for everything.
Yeah.
But once I read that study, I started finding myself thinking, oh yeah, I've got 10 minutes. I can run this errand, or I've got 15 minutes. I can do this, or whatever it is. The point to all of that is you have to be really honest with yourself and very self-aware and go, okay, I know in 10 minutes I can potentially run that errand, but what's really going to pay off for me? Just to go ahead and go to the meeting, or to try and squeeze things in. And it's the same way when you're thinking large. Okay, I have this book idea. I want to write this new book. I want to get it published. Once you've been through it, you kind of know the cycle. But if you haven't been through it, it becomes tough. Like you've got to write a ton of content, probably twice as much content as you actually need. Then you've got to edit. Then you've got to trim down. Then you've got to rewrite. That's a 1 to 2 year process. Even if you're a full-time writer, no one comes out with stuff that quickly. Okay, so say you're going to write that book, but you also work a full-time job and you have a family. If it takes a year or 2 years for a full-time author to write a book, how long do you think it's going to take you? Probably 3 to 4 to 5 years. So that's self-awareness. That's actually going, okay, what really makes sense? Yes, I want to get this published in a year. Is that going to happen? Could. Is it going to be good? Probably not. So just back up and really think about what's happening. So the first thing is self-awareness. I think the second thing is being okay with letting people encourage you. In other words, being okay with someone telling you, hey, that's not going to work that way. That's too big of a thought. That's too grandiose. Let's make it smaller, okay? Because for me, it's a pride thing. When I have a big vision and a big dream, I want to get there. And it's a pride thing to go, okay, that's not going to work for now. Maybe that's a 7-year goal. So to have someone or a few people around you that can go, no, 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 that's too big. Let's back up a little bit. Let's take baby steps here. So I really think those two things are critical, self-awareness and accountability. So many times as people that are entrepreneurs, side hustlers, creators, artists, we're also very private people normally because we're so in tune with what's happening creatively or working hard that we forget, we tune everything else out. And I think that's why on the creative side of things, you see so many people that, either end up dying by suicide or self-sabotage or whatever, because I think there's this idea that we have this big vision and we don't want anyone else to touch it. But really, we need other people to touch it. Because if no one else touches it, it's not going to make the sense that it needs to make for the world to see. So I think that accountability, if you don't have someone around you, find that group of people that you can really share those ideas with. Now, I don't share with too many people because you can get too many voices, but I think to have those few people to hold you accountable is big.
Yeah, I guess it's almost bouncing your ideas off them as well, just to kind of,
yeah,
it kind of comes together with self-awareness though, right? It's maybe you're not 100% self-aware and someone can just give you that reality check or have that conversation with you to, on the flip side, to let you know that it's okay in case you're putting too much pressure on yourself.
Yes.
And you kind of know it, but you're not sure. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's the same if we go back to, say again, someone wants to be, open their bakery or they want to do that on the side as their side hustle. In fact, I've had that situation where someone wanted to do that exact same thing and she was a great baker. And for years she was like, well, what, asking me, what do I do? Who do I talk to? And I said, well, it doesn't matter how small you think your plan is. The first thing you need to do is go talk to an accountant or go talk to a banker or go talk to someone to share this idea. Second thing you do is look at your marketplace. Like there's all these things you can do to actually start making sense of that dream. If you're in a town of 1,000 people and there's already 3 bakers there, do you really think you're going to be able to sell your baked goods? Probably not. So you're setting yourself up for failure if you take on a task that just isn't, again, let's go back to our word, alignment. Like that's why alignment is such a big word and a big key to all of this opportunity, because you don't want to put all your effort into a side hustle and it doesn't pay some type of currency. Now, again, we have all these types of currency, but if you're just setting yourself up for failure, and you see that a lot, someone says, well, I want to get into trading, sports cards, but they know nothing about sports cards. Well, then your first step is to gain some knowledge of sports cards. Well, I don't want to put the energy into that. Okay, fine. Then don't do sports cards because it's not going to work for you. It doesn't align with what's happening right now.
Yeah. And I guess how much of that comes down to external pressures and what people almost think they want, because that's either what they've been told or that's what they've grown up with or what society deems as a success. And it kind of goes back to defining success, I think. But how do you kind of deal with that and understand what you really want?
Yeah, right. Because we all pick these up and we look on Instagram and Twitter and whatever else is out there right now. And that builds that internal pressure.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Gary Vaynerchuk has 42 million followers. I only have 1,500. And we build this pressure in. Oh my gosh, that person put a really cool video out with that cute bikini on, and I don't look like that, so I can't wear a bikini. And all this self-imposed pressure that's happened to us societally, and it's across the world. This isn't just an issue that, in the United States, it's across the world. Everyone's dealing with this. And really it's taking that idea and backing that up and going, okay, A, who am I? And what am I passionate about? Nothing else matters. Like if I know who I am and I'm getting to know myself better and I know what my passions are, what I like to tell people is you have a natural passion that's almost like a spiritual existence. It's like, ooh, I really love encouraging people. Okay, listen to that. Ooh, I really love drawing. Okay, listen to that. Like whatever that passion is there, it's almost like it's the thing you do without choosing to do it. That's the alignment we're looking for. And all of a sudden now we lessen the burnout, we lessen the stress. And really, when you're doing what you can't even choose to do, it's like it chose you. You're not worried about all the other stuff. If you're an artist, a painter, and you're painting pictures and you're drawing and it brings you to life, do you ever really worry about what other people are going to think? No, because it just chose you. It's almost like that's just what you do. And so when we can align our side hustles, really idealistically, if we can align our whole life around whatever that passion is, around whatever that spiritual presence is, it changes everything. And all the voices and the self-imposed pressure starts going away. When I'm sitting down writing or doing my podcast or talking to people like you, I don't worry about anything else. It's when my life isn't aligned that I start worrying about everything else.
Yeah. And all of a sudden it becomes work because you're almost doing it because you feel you have to, not because you want to.
Yes.
And that's when you don't enjoy it. And all of a sudden you're going down that path. And it kind of comes back to that state of flow. And I'm going to butcher the name, so I'm not going to attempt it. But when you are in that state of flow and everything else kind of falls away, that's how you know you're doing something you love, right? You don't.
Right.
There's just nothing else happening. You're just so sucked into this kind of tunnel vision, almost doing what you love.
Yes.
That's what you love doing.
I read something in a book the other day, and I'm reading a few books right now, so I can't remember which one it was. But basically, the author said, when you are doing a task and you lose track of time, that's when you have found what you're meant to do in life. And I think that's very true because all of us have experienced that, right? Yep. Whether it's hanging out with friends or doing something we enjoy or whatever, and time just, you look at your watch, you're like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 2 hours and it feels like 10 minutes. Okay, do more of that. Like that's the goal. Do more of that. Call it a side hustle, call it what you want. But here's the funny thing. I would dare to say that 90% of people that get into a side hustle do it because they're not satisfied with what they're doing with the majority of their time. Like that's really what's happening. And so now if we can connect side hustle with alignment and put those two together, now all of a sudden we're on to something. Now we're on to this whole spiritual existence that we're talking about, this existence where time really doesn't exist. You just are. You're very present in that moment.
Yeah, I know when I'm in that because I forget to eat, and I don't ever forget to eat.
Same.
Right? If I've lost my appetite, that means I'm doing something I enjoy.
Same.
Right. Yep. Okay, so I guess some of the reasons some of the non-financial reasons potentially that people might do a side hustle is to understand what their passion is, because maybe they haven't either realized it or they haven't quite found it. So how do people kind of come into that to understand that alignment and find what they enjoy, and what are the routes that people can kind of go about getting to that?
Yeah, let's go old school here for a second, right? Take out a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and literally just answer these questions. Number one, what do you absolutely love doing? In other words, if someone said, I need you to do this, you would never come up with an excuse for it. It doesn't matter what, there's no right or wrong answer. Like we're not judging anything here. So what do you absolutely love doing? Number two, what do you find yourself talking about most of the time? Just in the middle of a conversation, you end up talking about something. Number three, go to the bookstore. Which books intrigue you the most?
I like that.
Which books intrigue you the most? Because that's going to give you what's happening is those three questions. What do you love doing? What do you enjoy talking about the most? And which books intrigue you the most? Those three questions are going to start opening up a doorway to curiosity. And it's a curiosity that's already in you by nature. And if you want a fourth question, that is incredibly magical. The fourth question would be, when you were a child, because you probably won't remember, when you were a child, what does your family say that you enjoyed doing all the time? I believe that the innocence of childhood is actually the gateway to being an aligned human being. And I think we miss that because we get into fourth and fifth grade or wherever you're at in the world, whatever your beginning school was, you get to a certain age and people start telling you, you could never do that. You can't be a professional football player. You can't be an astronaut. That doesn't happen. And so then we start believing that. My question is, what happens if we never stop believing? You may not become an astronaut, but you may become a physicist. You may not become a pro football player, but you could become a coach or a personal trainer. You know what I mean? So we actually tell children to stop believing in what's already existing within them, which becomes their side hustle eventually, right? Like, because they're circling back to what they love doing most.
Yeah,
Answer those 4 questions and you'll be well on your way to opening opportunities that you never thought possible.
I'm smiling because I know you're probably talking about the American football, but I always wanted to be
or it could be the other.
Soccer. I always wanted to be a soccer player, but obviously, girl, it just, especially when I was growing up, wasn't even a thing. It's not even like women's football now that has taken off, and I guess it's even bigger in the States, but it was just never even an option. I never thought it was an option. And when you're told that at that age, it's like, okay, I guess it's not going to happen. And you do give up and you do kind of forget about it.
Yeah.
I guess with those kind of careers, it probably is a cutoff, but that doesn't mean you can't do it in some capacity.
Well, I think that's what happens. Is I think number one, as adults, we get into adulthood and the world crashes down on us and we get disappointed. And so we live from that disappointment rather than living from curiosity. And by the way, I'm speaking from a lot of experience within my own life. When you live from disappointment, you're going to continuously spread the message of disappointment. And so then the thought becomes, well, that child thinks they could be a professional football player, but she's a girl. We need to let her know what reality is now. Again, it's not our place to tell children what they can and can't be. Now, you may have never become a professional football player. What if you would have gone into selling soccer balls? Or, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know where that's going to go, but you'll never know. You'll never know if you crush that dream so young. That there's an innocence and a curiosity within children that we lose. And I believe it's time we stop losing that. And if we've lost it, we need to get back to it. You know, what is that curiosity? What else could I learn? What else could I try? What other risk could I take? A child doesn't worry about that stuff. You know, like a child goes to a swimming pool and goes to the edge of the diving board and is like, I'll jump. Who cares? Like, let's go, until someone tells them not to. You know what I mean? And so I think it is that curiosity that really leads to what we're calling side hustles. Because again, I actually think side hustles, for 90% of side hustlers, is actually a window into what they really love about life. And so my proposal is, do more of that. Somehow, some way, do more of that.
Yeah, I completely agree, 100%, because obviously there's a lack of satisfaction somewhere for you to go elsewhere looking for something. Otherwise, you just wouldn't, would you? If you were doing what you love day in, day out, there would be no need to go and look elsewhere.
Right.
How do you... So obviously we've talked about from a point of view of non-financial rewards or kind of gains from it, but what about those that do want to make money out of it, either to replace a full-time income or because they need to, because it's in addition to? How do they kind of create that alignment, or do they not, because other factors like money trump it? And or how do they potentially keep that working in the background to maybe get to that point?
Yeah, so up until this point, we've been talking very idealistically, right? Like, if life was perfect, here's what it would look like. So now let's talk about realistically. So let's say Sarah has, she's a single mom. She has 2 kids. She's just working the job she can work, whether it's a career or, whatever. And she's like, okay, I need an extra $400 a month. Here's the great thing. All of that consumerism and that immediacy we talked about earlier from a negative light, There is actually leverage there. And the leverage is you have all the opportunity in the world to make an extra $400 or $500 a month with not a lot of effort. It could be things like, for instance, there's a professional basketball player in America. His name is Damian Lillard. He plays for the Portland Trail Blazers. A couple of weeks ago, he scored 61 points in a game. So he is sponsored by Adidas. 61 points is a lot, by the way. He's sponsored by Adidas, right? So for 2 days, for almost a 24-hour time period, so a full day, Adidas put his line of shoes that are normally $150 to $200 on sale for $61 because he scored 61 points. So let's just think about that for a second. Let's say I have $300. Spend that $300 on those $61 pair of shoes and wait 2 weeks and then sell them. So there's all kinds. That's just one thing that I wasn't able to do it at the time, but in my head I was like, if you could buy a whole size run of those shoes, you would flip it and make over double your money. And so the point to that is there's all these little things because of the consumerism and immediacy and the internet. You can go on eBay and buy things. You can go buy a cheap lawnmower and mow lawns. You can do whatever you need to do to make that money. And so I believe that especially when it comes to finances, desperation is the great motivator. So if I'm terribly desperate for an extra $500 a month, I'm going to find a way to make an extra $500 a month. Maybe it's going and getting a part-time job at night for 20 hours a week. Maybe it is buying Damian Lillard's shoes and flipping them, whatever it is. And I think that capacity depends on the person. Someone may say, well, I have an extra $500 a week. I need an extra $500 a month, but I have zero money to invest. Okay. That person is probably going to go get a traditional job for 20 to 25 hours a week. Say someone says, well, I've got $500 saved up and I can invest that. Now we're dealing with a whole different set of circumstances. But I do believe that when it comes to money, especially, that desperation of needing to survive is the biggest motivator. Now, on top of that, I'll say this. I actually think when it comes to finances, the greatest side hustle is cutting your cost of living.
Yep.
That's the greatest side hustle. And so if I need an extra $500 a month, again, we have a big vision, but we're talking temporary season. I may need to, and in America, we have what's called cable. That's how you watch TV. It's $70 to $100 a month. Maybe I have to cut that for 6 months. Maybe I have to cut down on buying the extra grocery items that I like to buy. Maybe I need to stop driving around so much and I can save $30 on fuel. Maybe I need to sell my car and get a cheaper car. There's all kind, or a bike, whatever it is. There are all kinds of ways that we can probably cut $200 to $400 a month just on cost of living alone. And I think people forget that.
Yeah, I was going to say, do they forget it or do they not want to change their standard of living?
Both. Yeah, I think it's both. And the reason why I say people forget it is because it's not the first thing that people mention.
Yeah. It's making money, not saving money, right?
Right. So they go, oh my gosh, I need an extra $500 a month. How am I going to make that? Well, I don't know. Could you save it potentially? Like I have a closet full of clothes, too many clothes. I have more. I enjoy fashion. If I needed an extra $500 a month, I could probably go sell my closet full of clothes and keep 2 or 3 things. I can wash them. I'm not going to die. It's not taking away my oxygen. I could sell the majority of my possessions and be perfectly fine. And I just think people forget that. Now, whether that's motivated by their standard of living, potentially, but I do think it's directly related to what we talked about earlier with all of these expectations in culture and in society. Oh my gosh, if I sell my big house and downsize, what are people going to think of me? Does it really matter? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, so we all know at a level that it doesn't matter, but
Right.
yet we all
live like it matters.
Absolutely. There's almost no way of saying, and like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I don't care what people think. There's absolutely no way I couldn't care. Yes, maybe I try not to care so much, but it's just I guess we're built like that, right? We need to understand what other people are thinking, and it's the whole, herd thing, right? It's being in that community. So how how do you go about not caring and not doing those comparisons when everywhere you look, there's something or someone to compare yourself to?
So let's repackage. Let's back up. Instead of using the phrase "not caring," which is the phrase that I used, let's repackage that to where it's a little more palatable. Because honestly, really, what we're talking about is acceptance. That's what we're really talking about. Is as a human, at a human level, I want to be accepted by other people. So let's back up and not use "not caring," and let's look at it this way. If I have this thought or this idea that's about, well, I need to get rid of some things. My side hustle I need to make more money. But the first place I'm going to start is by cutting my expenses. I'm worried about what people are going to say. So let's ask this question when that starts creeping up, because it's even as small as, do I wear this shirt or the other shirt? And what are people going to say? Right? It's even, all of us go through that, right?
Yeah.
So let's ask this question. Okay. Instead of ignoring it, let's go, what is this thought teaching me in this moment? So I'm telling myself I need an extra $500 a month. I know that I can cut some things out of my way of life. I'm worrying about what people are going to think. What is that telling me about myself? Again, we're going to go back to where we started with self-awareness. To have great self-awareness, you're not ignoring things, you're actually listening to things. Well, this scares me. Okay, what is that teaching me? Are they going to accept me? Okay, what is that teaching me? If I get rid of my car that I just bought to get a lesser car, what are my friends at work going to say? Okay, what is that teaching me? And when we can look at that honestly and we can say, okay, there's this old Buddhist idea that says, it's talking about fear. And it says, when fear arises, you simply say to fear, welcome, fear, come in for a cup of tea. And so what you're doing is you're actually sitting at the table with fear and you're learning from it. And I think we can apply that to everything. I'm worried about selling my car, getting a used car, or riding my bike to work. My friends are going to ask questions. Okay, what is that fear of that moment teaching you about yourself? When we can step into that solidarity, it never goes away. You're exactly right. That idea never goes away. What happens is it becomes more manageable because we're learning from it. And we're listening to it, and we're sitting at the table drinking tea with all of these things that are scary, and we don't eradicate those thoughts. What we do is we become better students of those thoughts. Now, when we become better students of those thoughts, now I've taken over the power. The things outside of me don't have the power. I now have the power.
Yeah. Okay. That's a much better way of looking at it. It's not about ignoring those things because they're not going to go away.
Right.
And the more you try to ignore it, the more it's just going to like knock at your door and be like, hello,
right.
I'm here. Right. Stop ignoring me. Whereas if you actually confront them and have that conversation and understand them, then that's how you can learn to, like you said, manage them and deal with them and accept them.
But here's the difficult part, right? The scariest person in the world to each of us is ourselves. The one thing we don't want to face in life is either our shadow or our reflection. And so when you start listening to those thoughts and you start going, okay, so let's just even go back to side hustles, right? The first question really needs to become is, why am I doing this? That was the question we asked. What's the motivation? Am I doing this out of passion? Am I doing this out of necessity? Okay, whichever one it is, that's what we do. We deal with that reflection. But that's what becomes scary. And that's why we start self-sabotaging. And everyone does it. Everyone does it. We start self-sabotaging all of this great idealism we have, either with things like, oh, I could never do that, or they'll never accept me in school, or I'm too old, or I'm too young. Those are all phrases of self-sabotage. But when we sit with them and we go, okay, what is this thought teaching me? We now take on all the power, and we now take on all the responsibility, and we can now look at our reflection or our shadow and feel totally comfortable with it. It doesn't necessarily get easier. It just becomes more comfortable. Those are two very different things.
Yes.
The work doesn't become easier. It just becomes more comfortable. And that's the place we want to get to.
Right. Okay. So I guess it links very closely with that is, and one of the recurring themes on a lot of these episodes has been imposter syndrome.
Yes. Yep.
Which I guess is difficult to avoid in these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody is doing something that they enjoy while it's a hobby or while it's, a weekend thing, you don't really think about those things. But if you are someone who wants to take it to the next level because it's genuinely what you want to do, but there are thoughts holding you back, and I guess very similar to the whole comparison thing, there are things in your head that are like, no, you can't do that. What do you do?
Listen to it.
Yeah.
Like that's the magic. Like that's the key. Because when you avoid it, you suppress it, and it's going to come back. Like you said, it's going to keep knocking at the door. It's going to come back and revisit itself. So we know it's going to come back. So you listen. Okay, something inside of me is telling me I could never do that. Why am I telling myself that? That's my voice talking to myself. Well, why am I telling myself that? Am I not prepared? Do I really not believe it? Is it really not my passion? Does it not align with my life? Or is it just me self-sabotaging? Like it could be that simple. So I think you listen to it and you have a conversation with it. It's like anything else in life. If you have and we forget this when it comes to ourselves, right? If you and I have a bickering, or we disagree about something, or we're not getting along, any psychologist will tell you the best thing you can do is actually talk about it, communicate with it. We forget that when it comes to self. We just ignore everything. Okay, you could never open a bakery. Why can't I ever open a bakery? By the way, when you have these conversations with yourself, you kind of sound a little, crazy, but it's okay. We need more crazy, right? So it's like, okay, have that conversation with yourself. Most of the time, the reason those voices are coming is because you're not prepared. And so instead of putting effort into preparing yourself, putting effort into doubting yourself. Because the more you prepare and the more you educate yourself, the less fear you have. So listen to those voices, because those voices will motivate you to move forward. 100%. Yeah, listen to them.
And is this, I guess, a lot of people say that journaling is quite good for these type of things. What's your take on that?
Yeah, journaling I think is amazing. If you're going to use it for empowerment, in other words, if all you're going to do is write down your sorrows every day, then that doesn't give you much empowerment. But if you're going to write down your curiosity along with your sorrows, one thing a pattern I took, I don't know where I got this from, maybe it just happened, but a pattern I took years and years ago when I started journaling is to make sure that when I did my journal entry, that it always ended on hope. Notice I didn't say positivity, but it always ended on hope. Like, for instance, even though today was a tough day, I faced these challenges. I didn't step up to the challenge like I wanted to, but I'm hopeful, or I'm grateful that I had the opportunity. When you can end on hope and end on gratefulness, you'll always have a better tomorrow, no matter what. And over time, when that becomes the habit and the practice, over time, that's going to start, infiltrating your psyche and your thought process. I think the other thing is to have an outlet. I think we live in such a society that we're so focused on money and on survival. I really dislike the phrase "Thank God it's Friday," because if you're working a job looking forward to Friday, then what are you really doing? Like, what kind of life is that? And I see people say it all the time.
I just had that conversation with somebody on Friday. I was like,
yeah,
I don't like saying that on a Friday.
No, it doesn't make sense. And is Saturday really better than Monday? Like, no, it's the same thing you're getting. Like we've created this whole monster that's messing with us emotionally. So I think having an outlet, I think having this idea of what is something you can do that you just love, and that oftentimes becomes a side hustle. I mean, that oftentimes becomes what we're actually talking about right now, is having that outlet. So I think journaling is great. I think having any type of outlet. I'm of the belief that every single human being is creative. You'll hear a lot of people say, well, I'm not that creative. No, you are. You just may not be creative like you think you should be. And so I think finding that creative outlet is very, filling for the soul. Yeah.
It's true. I think when you think creative, you think painter or artist
Yes.
or kind
Yep.
of, and it's just that's not the only side of creativity. Okay, that 50 minutes has absolutely flown by. I just looked at the time and I was like, wow. Do you have any kind of last minute messages or thoughts or advice or something we potentially haven't covered or something you want to say that I've maybe missed?
I want to go back to the idea because I'm really big on it internally right now. And that is shifting away from the idea of side hustle and shifting focus on alignment. And I'm all about what I call redeeming words. So we can use the phrase side hustle as long as it's not putting more stress on someone's life. And I know there may be people that need that extra money. They need that extra whatever it is. And I get it. I know there's people, like I've been in this situation for a long time where I wanted my dream to turn into full-time income. That may or may not happen, but I'm going to keep doing what I love doing and hopefully it will. But I can't concern myself with what isn't. I can only concern myself with what is. And I think when we can do that, we all of a sudden see that alignment coming into place. All I can focus on is now. All I can focus on is where I am currently. And I think that changes the idea. If I'm, a lot of times people start a side hustle because they're working a job they don't enjoy. So I think that becomes a practice ground every day for that gratefulness and for that hope. Maybe you get off work, you're like, I survived another day, but I'm grateful for a job, right? And we've all kind of gone through that. And so I think just having that alignment and shifting the mindset to become, I don't view life as compartmentalized. I view life as a whole. Everything is connected. And so if we can view it like that, everything is aligned, everything is connected, then it kind of changes the idealism of what's happening. Because like you said in the beginning of the show, there's a lot of pressure for side hustle right now, right? And what people don't get is guys like Gary Vaynerchuk are great. But Gary Vaynerchuk has $200,000 a year to go blow on a side hustle. And he knows that and he's aware of that. Most of us don't have that. And so I think it's just you talked about imposter syndrome. It's okay to mimic someone for a little while, but eventually you have to live in your own identity. And so just make sure if you're trying to take something that someone's doing, mimic that for a little bit within reason. But just remember, you have to step into your own identity at some point in time.
Yeah. And actually, I think, again, going back to the whole negative connotations with side hustle, a lot of people give up on a dream or stop doing something they love because they haven't fulfilled this kind of expectation that they've had. Whereas actually, if they let go of that expectation, they can still do what they love. Yes, maybe it's not in the same capacity, but actually they're still doing something they love day in, day out, rather than just giving up on it.
This would be a whole nother episode, which maybe we can come back to at some point. But the idea of living without expectation, that is a very difficult practice, but it's a very healthy practice because we've tied our dreams and our visions and our hopes and goals to expectation. You can still have big dreams, big visions, big goals, but live without expectation. And that is an amazing, it's an amazing kind of thought process to work through and to live from. So we won't get into it today, but I would encourage people to just kind of take time to consider that, living without expectation.
Yes, actually, I'm very looking forward to having that conversation.
Yes.
That's definitely something I do to myself.
Same. That's why it's a practice. That's why it's a practice, because we do it try it every day.
We'll get there.
Yes, we will. We will.
Amazing. Mitch, thank you so much. I've had a lot of fun. Honestly, that time has flown by.
Yes.
Thank you to everybody who's joined us and who is watching the replay or is listening to this on the podcast. In order to find Mitch, he is on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook.
And Facebook. I don't use Facebook a whole lot, but I am there. Yep.
Okay. At M Gray Media. Excellent. So go and find him there. He also has his own podcast, which I can't remember where you can find. So I'll let you take that one.
Pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts, it's The Mitch Gray Show. Just Google The Mitch Gray Show and it'll pull up. Also on our YouTube channel, M Gray Media, all of our podcast episodes are actually on there from video. And then I do some other videos as well. So yeah, you can find us all kinds of places.
Amazing. So go and check Mitch out. There's a lot of good stuff there if you hadn't worked that out from tonight's episode. So go and find him, go and follow him, go and drop him hello. I'm sure I'd love to have a conversation with you. And once again, thank you, Mitch. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. It was amazing.
Thank you. And I'll see everybody next week. Bye, guys.